Hey guys, Mike here. Make sure you subscribe and check out some of my other videos. Now let's get into today's one. I just watched the first episode of season 8 of Futurama on Hulu, and I wanted to talk all about what I thought about it. First of all, it is so good that this show is back. I feel like Futurama is one of those real comfort kind of shows. One of those shows that just feels good to have on, even if it's just in the background while you're doing other stuff. But I was always so sad when Futurama kept getting cancelled and then it kept getting brought back and then cancelled again. But I guess if it's going to live on in that kind of cycle, I'm okay with it. And this is the latest edition of Futurama being back. There are 20 episodes over the next 2 years, and I might talk about all of them on this channel, so definitely subscribe. And I think this was a great first episode back. I think it was very self-referential and meta. It picks off exactly where the last series finale of Futurama left off, and overall it works really, really well. And what I always loved about Futurama was that where Matt Groening's The Simpsons was a satire or send-up of like the American family home, Futurama was a send-up of science fiction and visions of the future, and I always thought it was really on point with a lot of things that it predicted and a lot of ideas that it put forth. Often the show would take things from our age and sort of see what they might be like in the future. And that's kind of what happens in this episode, which features a satire and parody of binge watching, content saturation, and streaming services making and building content for audiences. Plus, obviously, you would have noticed this entire episode is referential to Futurama's own existence and this return of Futurama. There's a few things here that I thought were really interesting and of note about this episode. Of course, the premise is after the events of the season finale, they are now back, and Fry realizes he's been in the future for 23 years because of the time skip, also realizes he hasn't achieved much in the future and really wants to achieve a big goal, of which he decides it's going to be to binge every TV show ever made. And when he opens HULU, the Futurama parody of Hulu, the network that actually picked Futurama up, we actually see some pretty funny parodies of existing shows and movies, including Slurmdog Millionaire, Stranger Fonts, How I Met Your Smizma, Blob's Burgers, Head Lasso, and of course, The Scary Mirror, a spiritual successor to Futurama's own The Scary Door, which of course is another Black Mirror Twilight Zone style parody. We then get a very funny, satirical Black Mirror style episode of The Scary Mirror in which a driver is reversed with the in-car playback Siri system, and now Siri is driving the car, to which Amy has a funny off comment where she says, "Wow, it really makes you think," which I think is like really sending up Black Mirror and Twilight Zone and all those shows where you do come out of it being like, wow, that really makes you think. And on a side note, this did really feel like a good showcase of a lot of the extended characters and themes of the show. Scruffy appears, all of the Planet Express crew are there and have lines. We also have Calculon as a lead character, the robot devil appears. There's a lot of the expanded world of Futurama present here, which I think is great. It really just serves as a reminder of how cool, fun, exciting, and broad this world was, and hopefully we get more built on it this year. So Fry enters this binge watch machine to binge watch all of the shows, but realizes that it's so hard to binge watch everything and he's not able to do it. And he gets stuck in the machine, with Professor Farnsworth saying that if he gets to the season finale of All My Circuits, which is the Calculon soap opera show, then his consciousness will be severed. And that leads Bender and Leela to start pioneering a new season of All My Circuits to make sure the episodes keep coming. Again, this is a send-up of what actually happened with Futurama being cancelled and then brought back for another series of episodes, and there are some pretty specific mentions of 20 episodes over 2 seasons and etc., which mirrors Futurama's own situation. And I do think that I think it was a good idea to start with an episode like this. I think it's quite obvious, and a lot of the satire here is obvious. There isn't too much to it. It's pretty deliberately just mocking Futurama's own existence, which they always have done. This might have been the most on the nose or explicit they've ever done, and I thought it was pretty good for the first episode back to be that. At first I thought it was a bit lame, including like the Hulu sort of ad for Hulu, but it kind of grew on me. And here's where I think the main satire comes in through this All My Circuits episode production. Basically, two things happen here that I think are really prevalent, because I personally believe that in our society right now, we are experiencing this content saturation. There is such a stiff competition, not only in the streaming world, but in the online world, in podcasts, in everything, where there is so much content out there. Look at stuff like TikTok even, how much attention that seeps in, because TikTok gives you a little bit of everything. There are so many different shows, so many movies, it is so competitive, so many series coming out. How do you keep up with all of them? There are so many podcasts to listen to. There's just so much content to consume, including this video that you're watching right now. How do you fit it all in? Fry starts watching things on 2x speed, which I feel like is a really interesting thing that people do now. We watch stuff on double speed, or we listen to podcasts on 1.5 speed, and it's more about things just being content to consume and finish rather than to actually sit there and appreciate something. We are so obsessed with getting things done and finishing things and just saying that you've seen it instead of actually loving stuff. And as a 90s kid, I remember being a kid and everything felt so much more meaningful. Like, there might have only been 3 or 4 things you could watch on TV, and you might have only had 2 or 3 DVDs in your house, right? And you just watch the same thing over and again. Now I feel like everyone's trying to get everything done, watch everything, and Fry is trying to do that, double speed, which leads Leela and Bender to have to make things on double speed. They have to make things as quickly as possible, putting essentially the least amount of effort possible into it and just trying to churn out content. Funnily enough, this concept was kind of addressed in a recent episode of Black Mirror, the Joan is Awful episode, in which an AI quantum computer is just creating content. And I actually think the way Futurama looks at it is like how quickly things are being churned out and how just essentially things just need to be made to keep up with this content hustle and this content cycle. And I think Futurama really expertly manages to satire that as well in a much different way to how Black Mirror did. But I would argue that the satire of Black Mirror and the satire of Futurama are very, very similar a lot of the time, even though Futurama leans much more into the goofy and funny and comedic, whereas Black Mirror leans more into the unsettling and the unknown and the mystery of these kinds of things. They're still dealing with very similar concepts. There's a speech towards the end when All My Circuits is being cancelled again from the HULU executives, who are all robots. Again, and maybe another kind of stab at where we are headed as a society when computers are doing everything and AI is making everything. Do we end up just having whole TV networks run by AI, just pushing content out? And they say a small speech that might even be what the Futurama staff were told the last time they got cancelled. Essentially, like, you are so valuable to this company, but get out immediately. We thank you and we love your show and we love everything about it, but it's not rating, so we don't want it. Of course, the ending sees that Fry actually left the machine a few days earlier and hasn't been in there, so everything has sort of been for nothing, which I think was a bit of a predictable ending. But then the credits start to roll and then another short bit comes in which Fry is in a courtroom and again makes a lot of meta, self-referential points in front of Richard Nixon and a legal panel. And he mentions how shows need to be cancelled every few years and people should only be able to binge watch 10 episodes max. Again, calling back to the amount of episodes being renewed for Futurama this year and next. Overall, I thought this was a great episode. It was so cool to hear all of the voice actors again, you know, Billy West, and I was kind of disappointed that it wasn't a Fry heavy episode because he's my favorite character, but of course, Billy West, John DiMaggio, Katie Siegel, like all of these iconic voice actors back again, and just the fact that as fans of this show, we get to enjoy it for another few years. And inevitably, I do think it will be cancelled again, but then hopefully in another 5 years, maybe we get another season. I would really love for that to continue for Futurama for as long as possible. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. I will probably do a video like this on every new episode of Futurama, and just check out some of my other videos or my podcast, which is also on this channel. I talk about pop culture on my podcast, 20th Century Boy, and I also do a lot of shorts, so check them out too. Thanks so much for watching. My name's been Radio Mike, and I'll see you in the next vid.